for joining us. We've been sort of doing these sort of hop-in sessions with TechSPARK for the last few weeks now, trying to understand and get some commentary from founders and entrepreneurs and businesses in terms of the impact that COVID-19, I've already said the word, sorry, is having on businesses. One of the kind of red flags that is showing is around revenue generation, i.e. business development. So we thought it would be prudent at this time to put together a session, and I'm joined by Jack Thompson and obviously Gabby, who we worked closely with before, to talk and hopefully guide and give some tips through and sort of navigate through this difficult time. So I'm Ashley. I'm the Director of Partnerships at TechSPARK. I also am the CEO and co-founder rather, of an agency called HDE, we're a performance growth agency for tech companies. So tech and digital is very much our space. And I'm joined by Jack.
Hello, good morning. Yeah, I've 15 years in sales and business development, I guess, is the easiest way to describe what I do. So now I work consultant, helping other businesses with their business development strategy and implementation. So mainly in the marketing agency space, but also B2B tech companies, anyone that's got a kind of consultative type approach to their sales, I guess. Yeah, and obviously very, very challenging times with the clients I work with in that space. So yeah, but spent the last 2 weeks talking to founders, business owners, people wrestling with the different issues, and yeah, hopefully got some insight that'll be useful to people today.
Nice.
Thanks, Jack.
I'm Gabby. I now feel an enormous amount of pressure to be singing my introduction, but you'll be pleased to hear I'll save you all from that. So yep, I run partnerships at Yellowdog. Ben referenced it earlier, but Yellowdog is a cloud and hybrid IT platform as a service scale up in Bristol. I joined that business just over a year ago to build out a partner network and kind of channel revenue streams from scratch. In reality, it's a kind of small, scrappy, growing business. So the role is pretty hybrid. So I've been doing a lot of direct sales, enterprise sales, kind of sales ops. And prior to Yellowdog, got a background in kind of partnerships, marketing, business development in and around the Bristol tech scene, plus a small stint living and working in New York, which I can't let go of.
That just makes you sound cooler than all of us sort of put together, mate.
I went there once.
Yeah, I went there once as well, but yeah, I didn't live there. Fair play, guys. Yeah, so obviously we know the sort of challenge that everybody's having at the moment. One of the immediate concerns that we saw when we were speaking to tech businesses is around immediate cash flow, and how do you know. There's issues like clients or customers holding on to invoices for longer, loads of different sort of terms and things being put into place around finances. So one of the things that obviously we've been looking at with our community is around cash flow, but remodeling. So I don't know if whatever you want to start in terms of your perception of that and some tips around immediate cash flow, sort of injections, I suppose.
Well, it's tough, isn't it, as a kind of panel full of salespeople who are by default very, very optimistic and are kind of paid to see the glass half full.
Correct.
But I think in situations like this, absolutely right. That's the most important. The most important thing to get hold of as quickly as you can is a grasp of the reality. Naturally, in a situation like COVID, that reality will change week on week, and I'm sure even now the impact on businesses is kind of far from clear. But one of the things that we went through very early on, and which we still kind of redo pretty much weekly, is remodeling on the two sides. You're sort of remodeling your revenue targets and your kind of sales targets, plus remodeling of your kind of cost lines, and modeling those under various different scenarios to understand, is there a gap? Unfortunately, probably yes, there will be a gap, and what is the size of that gap and what do we need to do?
Yeah.
Obviously, this session is about sales, so I'll focus more on that side. The thing that we found particularly helpful modeling this is when you're sort of running as normal, you'll do a kind of top-down approach. So you'll start with the big hairy number that you want to hit that year. Let's call it 5 million for the sake of it, and you start with that number, and then you break that down. How do we achieve that? And that then becomes your kind of your sales strategy and your plan. What's important to do in situations like this, probably, I know we'll touch on this a little bit later on, but probably a lot of the things we'll be saying should be part of what you're doing anyway, but especially in times like this, it's refocusing that kind of bottom up. So looking at all the insight, you've got your sales and marketing metrics, which are telling you what is actually going to be possible.
Yeah.
And certainly at the start, it can be tempting to just look at metrics like deals in the pipeline and deals closing and deals moving through the stage. But we sort of call those the lagging metrics. And before you get to those, you've got your current and your leading metrics. So current might be things like demos booked, qualification calls, qualified leads, opportunities created. And prior to even those, you've got your leading indicators, which might be your email opens, your click-through rates, inbound leads. And without understanding, those typically will be the first ones to kind of drop off the cliff, but the impact won't come maybe for a few more stages down the line. So whilst it can be a bit of a kind of stark experience to go through, that was one of the first things that we found very helpful to do, because then you have a bit more of a handle on
Certainly. And one of the first, just to kind of reiterate the point, one of the first things we did with HDE is do some remodeling. So working with, I know obviously we're focusing on business development, but we're speaking about sort of cash in the bank, and we're talking about revenue generating. The first thing that we did was work with our accountants and finance team alongside our business development teams to do some resilience testing and do some finance restructuring and remodeling, and do scenario remodeling as well. So when this all struck, like one of the first things that we did I know it's bonkers, isn't it?
A lifetime ago.
Yeah. First thing we did as a team, and it sounds stupid, but we literally picked up the phone and started speaking to our clients, just to kind of trying to get a grasp on it. And this is a moving thing, and this whole scenario and situation is ever evolving. If you said that we were in this situation now 3 weeks ago, I wouldn't have believed you. It is changing. It's a moving goal, but just getting a firm grasp on your client's kind of approach to it. So we've had a couple of clients who have benched us and said, do you know what, because of COVID and what's going on, we're going to put this on hold. But those conversations with other clients have actually led to further business discussions around actually how can we adapt and change our approach to market, or how can we look to explore additional sectors like public sector, for example. There are obviously, being capitalist about it, there's quite a lot of opportunity there at the moment for technology companies. So how do we look to build some value and relationships and start to actually pivot towards that? And it is a moving target. With the agency, with our agency, it's slightly more complicated because we're dealing with cross-border companies, so in different international locations. We've got a client who operates out of Australia, Hong Kong, and parts of Europe. Each of those are at different stages, so it can be very difficult to get sort of a grip onto that. But one of the first things, like I said, we did was pick up the phone, speak to them, and we have ongoing conversations. And it is a sales thing, because you are trying to protect your revenue, but also it is a relationship piece as well. And it's having that sort of empathy with the individual as well. We are all in this together. There's no getting away from it. Everyone is affected at different degrees and different levels, unfortunately. But just building those relationships with these clients over that time, whilst trying to get a firm grasp on their attitude to what's going on, will help you with those remodeling and those scenario testings as well. So if a client, for example, is your top spending client, but then, reacts and says, actually, we're pulling everything back. Oh crap, we're in the, we need to do something here because our revenue pot for the month is falling at the bottom. So that was one of the first things we did. I don't know about yourself, Jack, in terms of the organizations you're working with or your business personally.
Yeah. I mean, I think that one of the first things I did personally was like sort my own personal finances out, model my own like family income and household income and that sort of stuff. I'm sure a lot of people have been having to do that as well, how the next few months are going to be looking, because obviously it's impacted us all in different ways. And then I did the same for my business and obviously was overlaid on that, but I've been doing that with my clients as well. And I think you can kind of be optimistic and think about best case scenario, and it's all very quick at the moment, obviously. But to Gabby's point about modelling things, I think it'd be good to have a kind of best case scenario. So how has your business been hit in the short term? Have you seen a 50% drop of revenue, 75% drop, whatever? And to Gabby's point, probably more, in the sharp end of your pipeline, sort of leads being generated, conversations, how that's been affected. And you should be able to, if you've got any relatively sophisticated modeling, spreadsheets, etc., how you look at your sales funnels, you should be able to see how that's going to impact the rest of your year. Now, the open question is obviously how long the current state of play continues for. So you might be very optimistic, and Gabby said we're all probably optimistic if you're in sales. A couple of months, maybe 2 or 3 months of this, and then go back to some sort of normal. Obviously, what that normal is, a massive open question, but that would be kind of best case scenario, and then you should maybe model against that. Worst case, I mean, who knows? But, I know a friend of a friend works in cyber, and they've been talking about setting up their clients to work from home, with all the IT and everything for 6 months. And that's, they're cyber, they'll be, looking at the worst case scenario, obviously, but it is an open question. But at least from the purpose of having some numbers to look at and some numbers sort of plan against and roughly see where you sit for the rest of the year, I'd be looking in that sort of time frame. So have you been hit now? And then effectively extrapolate that over the next 6 months. Worst case scenario, this is my business for the next 6 months. Now, to Gabby's point and you're about sort of trying to action stuff against that. And I have seen some really good positive stories about people slightly pivoting their product or their service, their business model. You talked about it yourself, Ash, trying to go into spaces where there does seem to be some buoyancy in the market. I know Gabby's been doing that with Yellowdog as well. I've seen some of my clients do that as well, where they're not trying to go for something which is completely out of their comfort zone, because that's dangerous at the best of times. But if there's any green shoots or opportunities within the market that you operate in, if there's some way you can pivot your product to work in a slightly different way or work with a different, all of those you just have to be entrepreneurial, right? This is going to be a really big test of people's entrepreneurial stripes, because these are big problems to solve. But if you're on it and you've got, you know where you sit with your numbers, then you know where your gaps are, and then it's about coming up with ideas and really kind of trying to chuck everything you can at it. I think but to your point, Ashley, a lot of it is about relationships, right? Especially if you're in a B2B scenario, you've got your existing client relationships. I mean, it may be things have been paused or benched, or how long is that going to last for? You need to have some idea of clients of what that looks like.
Yeah,
partnerships, people and obviously again opportunities, people that you're talking to. Those relationships are really important. Even if it's okay, not right now, having some indication of, what's going to make this come back to life. What can we do to help kind of bring this along? And those relationships are really going to come into their own at the moment.
Absolutely.
You find out who you can trust and, who you can really work with over the next couple of months.
And I think it's business development and sales individuals at the moment. I think we're almost in the same pot as recruiters in some respects. If you get a call from a business development person or salesperson or a founder of a small agency like ourselves, you think you're going to be sold to. It is a relationship game, and just having conversations with your clients and prospective clients as well is really, really valuable. Yeah, but. Just to kind of finalize that point in terms of what we've all just said here, scenario planning is the kind of foundation of everything. So working closely with your sales and BD teams alongside your finance teams and your stakeholder leadership teams to build out kind of worst and best case scenarios. So you can find out, and you can actually build some resiliency within that as well. So if you don't hit that sort of halo target, and you're down here, you still know where you are. You're informed all the way, and you're able to make informed decisions on how to structure and go forward as a business, rather than having to react at a time when you're faced with a certain issue. So that's really good. So let's talk about metrics then. Obviously, and targets. It's it's 101 of sales. How obviously things are affected at the moment. Your sort of outputs are going to be impacted because perhaps people aren't in the office, and obviously your revenue targets as well are harder to achieve at the moment. What are you guys seeing with regards to outputs or metrics, and what are your thoughts in terms of businesses tracking their business development people and using the kind of traditional metrics in the context of COVID at the moment?
I think I can talk about what we've done on this. I'm sure many / all sales and business development teams out there at the moment, we've been sort of regrouping multiple times per week to understand what we should be doing and can be doing and could be doing differently to be super focused. And one of the first things we shifted was we looked at what we currently track and interrogate that and think, is this what we should now be tracking? And the first shift that we moved away from was stopping to track really so much of the input and much more focusing on the output. Reason being the ratios that we were or the kind of metrics and ratios. I can see Bentley in the background that we're used to seeing. So the X level of input equals Y level of output is likely to be completely turned on its head. So the main focus is on, what are we now able to get week by week, and what are we needing to put in to get that?
Yeah.
But I would just before we started that, just to expand a little bit on Jack's previous point, I think it's all well and good starting to kind of revisit the sales engine and the ratios and the metrics of this and that and the other. But I think before doing that, pausing before you kind of carry on as normal, despite the fact that everything has been flipped on its head. And Jack touched on this, but I think one of the things that we found most helpful that we did was really investigating what we had been working to as our target market and our ideal customer profile, and whether that still remained the case. And likely the answer is no. You start with the industries that these businesses are in, and that tells a story of its own. And then, but even it's a little more nuanced than that. Ben mentioned in his introduction to Yellowdog that one of the main sectors that we serve is media and entertainment. So content production, people making TV shows, people making films. Yeah. Obviously, 2 or 3 weeks ago, that industry pretty much ground to a halt. There's the things that have been making the news where just kind of overnight, Peaky Blinders or Stranger Things 4 or whatever, filming just across the world stopped. Got it. So you may extrapolate from that. Okay, so that industry has stopped. But actually what we went through is sort of segmenting that a little bit further. Who are people making content for? If it's for cinema, yeah, probably that's a big problem because cinemas are shut. But if it's for video on demand platforms, when has there been a higher demand for content on Netflix and Disney Plus? And so, but even so, and then it's like, okay, so they still need to be producing content, but they can't shoot. Okay, so it's the fully animated stuff. So thinking about this, so we essentially are focused at the moment in that industry on one small segment of the businesses that have the least impact and will need our service more than ever. Yeah. So I think if you can demonstrate that you have thought about the person on the other end of the, whatever it is, the phone, the LinkedIn message, the email, and you understand and you can show consideration that you've put yourself in their shoes, and you still believe that there is a need, there could be a need for them, for your service or product. Yeah, spot on. Then it's a much easier conversation to have than kind of blindly automating your messages as usual to a business that you probably know is shut and will be for the foreseeable.
Yeah, we've had to, like I said, as an organisation, I wrote a blog for AdLib about this the other day. around business development. And one of the things I highlighted is a lot of the technology companies that HDE serve and work for and do marketing services for have either benched us or pivoted towards public sector. I'm quite fortunate to have quite a deep knowledge, and having worked in the public sector with a technology firm for 3 years, understanding the mechanics and how it works and the processes of that is hugely valuable to my customers and my clients at this time, to help navigate through what is quite a complicated landscape and an ecosystem within central government. Simple things like an understanding of G-Cloud procurement, understanding the legislation around how procurement is now, the ruling around procurement has changed in a reaction to COVID, in terms of you can now direct award a vendor if they're able to provide a service. That understanding and bringing that value to clients who perceive themselves to not be able to be active during this period is one, opening doors, but it's also serving some real value to those clients. So that's exactly the same as your point when you're doing with your animators, Gabby, in terms of, identifying market conditions, communicating that with your clients and helping them to kind of pull through, in the hope that there is going to be a revenue generation opportunity for your business or your organization. But that's, yeah, absolutely. I think even simple things like the announcements of the government in terms of application pages for funding. So there's, within the tech space, there's been a number of funding opportunities from NHS, from public authorities, be it local authorities, housing associations, NHS partnerships as well, that are sort of aggregated hospitals from across a region, actually being very proactive and asking for engagement with technology vendors to solve some problems. Understand, from my perspective and from my ability, I understand that. I'm able to gather that information and share that with our clients to present value and opportunity for them to hopefully work with us and continue to work with us and allow us to kind of take them to market, albeit in a slightly different way.
I think, well, just I wanted to add on the KPI side of things. Obviously there's a lot of people watching this, and obviously people in very varying size of organisation. If you're managing a sales team or salesperson or whatever it might be, but you'd apply this to yourself if you're the de facto salesperson, business development person in your organisation, is obviously being really realistic. I mean, even in the best of times, having unrealistic targets and expectations of success is really bad. It's really demotivating. You set yourself up for a fail from the off. So especially in the current climate, be really realistic about what you can achieve, especially in the kind of sales and business development side of things. So having those conversations with your sales team or with yourself about what you actually can achieve in the current climate, being realistic about it, is one thing I'd advise. And obviously then being understanding about the results that your team may or may not be getting as a manager, and not pushing too hard, and because this is stressful for everyone at the moment. Sure. Setting unrealistic targets and pushing people too hard at the moment is just going to compound issues, really. And then you should be having that conversation with yourself to a certain degree. If you have got a team, and even if you haven't, I think it's always good to have daily stand-ups anyway. But you could have that, that cadence needs to be really important. So having just a daily check-in with your sales team, what's good, what's bad. Do they need help with anything? Just being there, supporting and nurturing, and also opportunity to share what's working. There may be particular tactics they've used, or conversations they've had, or things they've tried which have worked. And obviously at the moment, that kind of peer knowledge, that peer-to-peer learning is really important. So if anything's working within your team or your organisation, make sure everyone knows about it, right? Because you want to be, any opportunities you want to be on and learning from. And then I think at probably a higher level, reassessing the sources and how you generate leads. There are certain things that are and aren't going to work at the moment. So I think reassessing those opportunities to start conversations. Actually, ironically, given the fact that we're not allowed to go outside, things like this, networking, webinars, events have been really, really powerful for myself personally and some of my clients over the last few weeks. Because I could spend all day on webinars if I wanted to. I'd start at like 8 in the morning, finish at 7 o'clock at night. It's crazy. I've never had the opportunity to meet so many new people in my career in such a short space of time. So although, yes, there may not be any tangible business happening with a lot of these conversations right now, we're talking about top of funnel early conversations. it's been really positive from that point of view. So, some things aren't working, but some things still are working. And this is a great example of how kind of networking and events can really pull people together and make those connections. Who knows who might end up in business with each other based on meeting each other today. And that's happening every day at the moment. So there are some tips.
Linked to the KPI question then. So in terms of what advice would you give to those that are watching in terms of, because a lot of companies that we've spoken to through TechSPARK and through my own personal business are looking or focusing on existing account growth and expanding those accounts versus time being spent on generating new accounts or new clients. So rather than prospecting to whoever, they're focusing their efforts and their sales teams on growing out those accounts where possible and if possible. I don't know if you guys got any thoughts or sort of experience in terms of how your businesses are reacting around that.
Growing current accounts. I mean, I think it's if you've got any work with any existing clients at the moment and they're continuing to spend with you. I think there was a question in the chat about kind of the issue of furloughed clients, which obviously is an issue for some people. So there will be, every organisation is affected, but if you've got existing conversations with clients and they're still spending with you, this is this is the time where you try and nurture those relationships. So there's an old phrase, walking the halls. Obviously you can't physically walk the halls now, but if there's any opportunities for internal recommendations and referrals, if you work with a department over here, but there's a department over there that might be able to, those internal recommendations and referrals will be really powerful now. That may happen, if you've got furloughed clients, they know that your client, the one you work with day to day, has been furloughed. If you can still get hold of them somehow, is there someone else they can connect you with internally? And actually that may be beneficial to your business in the long term as well. So, kind of like, I don't really particularly like the term because it's a war reference, but that land and expand sort of approach, you've got a client conversation here. Well, how else can you have conversations? This is the time to be having those approaches where, how can I grow this account? Yes, there will be, if you've got a conversation, if there's a client, they're paying you, and they're a relatively large organization, you'd hope there'll be other conversations to have in there. So this is about leveraging those internal networks.
Jack, I'd also say that's kind of exact same philosophy translates, but trying to work with them to build an external referral. We've done a lot of that as well, because so many of our customers have had the kind of rug completely pulled from under them and are not in a position to be continuing with the projects we've started. The ones that are, they're getting, obviously, sort of not even out of choice, all of our attention. But in that thing of putting to the point that Ash made about getting as much insight from your customers and prospects as you can, they'll be having conversations of their own with their own communities. So if I use a specific example, we've been working with a German VFX studio who are a sort of leader in their space. They're seen as one of the big guns, and our stakeholder there is the owner of the business. He kind of runs the business, and in our call with him last week, he was saying how he'd just come off a breakfast session with the owner of, sort of 10, 15 other VFX studios in Germany, where they were all talking very transparently about how they've been impacted, who's got work to see them through the next months, who's got capacity coming up, and they're starting to collaborate between them. So firstly, there's a lesson there. If that's something you can be doing with partners, businesses within your own ecosystems, be doing that. But secondly, they've got so much more insight than we could hope to have in that particular space. And so it's saying, well, if you hear of businesses that suddenly find themselves in a very unusual situation and a product like ours would help, please feel free to put us in touch and kind of building that recommendation on that side as well.
Yeah, thanks, Gab. We are, just for everybody watching, we are going to get to the questions that you've been posting on the right-hand side at the end. We're going to open up the virtual floor, so to speak. But Russell Palmer's just posed a question, which is actually quite fitting to the KPI conversation we're having at the moment. obviously sales is highly commission sort of bonus focused roles, or it's performance paid role in most organizations. Obviously with the dip in the market at the moment and the way things are going, how especially for you, Gabby, obviously with a quite a large team at Yellowdog, how is that impacting the team, and what are you doing to try to kind of support them? Obviously, as our potential earnings are far less, how are you keeping them kind of motivated and sort of focused?
Yeah, this is really, really a tough one. And so there's a couple of communities that I'm in outside of my role at Yellowdog where this has come up a little bit more. And one is a kind of business development community for technology salespeople, and everybody is asking this. And it, again, you know, I'm naturally very optimistic, and we're here talking about what you can do to keep yourself going and stay positive. But the reality is it is completely bleak out there, and or it can be, but the answers to the modeling that you run at the start, which is essentially a kind of reforecasting conversation. I'm not sure if this was Russell's question, but I noticed this in a question previous, was how you then kind of navigate those conversations back up if you're kind of investor led and you're working to a pre-approved business plan for that year, which is exactly our situation. The purpose of those modeling exercises we spoke about is to give you that kind of hard data-led reality of where you're at as a business. So from an investor perspective, you'll be having those conversations about how your cash runway has been impacted and what are the things that you should be doing there. But from a sales and forecasting perspective, that annual figure that I called 5 million at the start might now look like 2. And so that will have an impact on individual quotas and individual targets, which will in turn have an impact on individual earnings.
Yeah.
There's not a magic bullet. There's not a simple answer. Things that I have seen out there, there's obviously an argument there. There's the one side of it, which is in an economic climate like this, you're lucky to have a job. So there's kind of the arguments that range from this end of the spectrum, which is obviously pretty demotivating, through to, in economic climates like this, we need you more than ever. Your work is more valued than ever. We're increasing your commission. You're safe. Yeah. And there's everything in between. And obviously, if you choose to increase commission and this kind of thing, that's a choice you're going to need to pay for somehow, whether it is reducing the size of your team, but increasing the earning potentials of the team that stays behind, which is obviously a difficult conversation to have, or whether it's keeping the sales team as it is, but making reductions elsewhere. You know, these are difficult things, and every choice that you make will have a kind of counter choice or a consequence elsewhere, but it's really a tough one.
Yeah, I think it does. It boils down to a lot of culture as well. In terms of your sales teams, obviously you hope that they are driven. Well, not hope, but if you have the right people in place in terms of that reflect the culture and behaviours of an organisation that aren't just chasing bucks, and if you are clear and empathetic to the situation, and when you're doing those remodelling exercises that we talked about at the beginning, if you are clearly communicating that with your sales teams, understanding that obviously is going to affect commissions and potential earnings, hopefully you're actually going to galvanize them on side. You're going to get they hopefully are going to get behind you. If you have that right culture, that's what you can hope for at the moment.
The one thing, sorry, Ash, I just want to kind of add on that is that there are things that you can do as a business, especially if you are a kind of early stage kind of startup-y business, that are long-term very incentivizing for your team, but short-term don't impact you cash flow-wise.
Sure, yeah.
Things like future cash or equity bonuses. If you have an option scheme with your team, you may think about converting some of those options into kind of hard equity, or there's things that you can look at as a business which communicate back, I appreciate the commitment that you're making to us, and I'm making a commitment to you as well. It's tough and that it won't be realised right now, but this is what we want to be working towards.
Yeah, cool. Okay, guys, that's really, really good. So we're going to go. We've touched on sort of remodeling and sort of approaches. And Russell, thanks for your question. That was nicely put. At the time we were talking about KPIs. So let's talk a little bit about sort of outbound and the approach to that. So we've touched on the focus between existing account growth versus new business generation. What are your tips in terms of outbound approaches at this time? In terms of picking up the phone or just, emails, how are you trying to navigate and how are you approaching these kind of conversations?
Well, I think I'd probably start with some stuff that I wouldn't be doing, I guess, or things I've seen that have been really bad. And Gabby touched on this earlier. I found myself giving not actually massively different advice than I'd give in a normal climate, if you like, because actually a lot of the bad stuff you see now is just bad practice normally, it's compounded by the current situation. So if you're leading with a obviously sales-led message, with zero personalization, literally, you can just tell there's no research or background gone into this. I've clearly got a generic email or a generic LinkedIn message or a generic phone call or whatever it is. Those things fall flat at the best of times, and quite rightly. Every now and again, if you happen to get someone at the right time or the right place, you might get a breakthrough if you're doing it at volume. But in the current climate, that is just, I don't want to swear, but it's just going to be annoying people. People are going to be affected by that. It's going to switch people off straight away. So if you're doing anything of that nature, I'd advise not to that normally, but I definitely 100% do not do that at the moment because it's just going to be burning bridges.
Yeah, 100%.
This is not my phrase, and I forget the lady who coined it the other day, so apologies, I can't give her props for the phrase, but she used the phrase "helping is the new selling," which I quite like. And actually, again, I probably advise that approach in the best of times, but at the moment it's really, really pertinent. So this goes to talking to current clients, opportunities, partners, whoever, the people that you speak to in your business world, do any way to help people. And that could be as simple as giving some advice. It could be about, to your point, Ash, packaging up some expertise that you have in a particular market. It could be that you've been, if you focus on a particular sector and for the last 2 weeks, you've been talking to all your clients in that sector and you've got a really good feeling of how that sector is being affected and how people are reacting to it. Could you package that somehow and take that, but it's helpful, it's useful, it's interesting, and hopefully it showcases your expertise as well, because obviously this is about you showcasing your business expertise, but it is really about helping. And not only that, okay, so you can take that to clients and prospects and send that to people if you think that you've got something genuinely will be helpful for them, and it needs to be genuinely helpful. But there's also other initiatives you can get involved in. It's not just about selling directly to clients. You can do things like, which would normally be considered to be sort of brand awareness or kind of marketing led. But are there initiatives you can help get involved in, whether it's supporting the NHS or key workers or various kind of charitable, really great community-led things that are happening. Most industries will have them. I've seen lots in the creative marketing space because that's the world I work within, but I'm guaranteed every industry has got something going on that you could potentially get involved in and offer help and support. It comes with a genuine place, hopefully, not just doing it to get some
absolutely
ground points, but there are some really interesting things to do. But I think slightly back to the last question, in climate like that, I've been through a recession before. You really, as a sort of sales or business development person, you really earn your stripes in times like this. And this is when you really kind of get the wheat from the chaff as far as performance is concerned. I mean, it is difficult. You can't expect people to work miracles. Yeah. But if your sales team previously were just sat there kind of answering the phone and going, "Oh yeah, I can sell you one of them. Yeah, no problem. Oh yeah, I can sell you one of them. No problem." That's not sales. That's just taking phone calls. If you want someone who's out actually, hungry and a proper, what I consider a proper BD salesperson, this is when they earn their stripes, because this
together.
Is tricky. Yeah. Exactly.
Just on that point, and this is for both of you. Zara's posed the question. It's a very good point in terms of the outbound approach and going out to your clients and prospects. How are we going to navigate the current markets and kind of clients that we work with when we're impacted with furlough? So those relationships you've built over the years, who are the P&L owners of a certain company, or they sign off your product or campaigns, but they've now left the organization. How are we navigating that? And have you got any tips for the guys watching in terms of how we go about sort of keeping the lights on effectively, although obviously organisations are impacted heavily through furlough.
Yeah, well, I think Gabby touched on it. It's that referral. We both kind of mentioned it's that referral thing. I think, you know, either if you can somehow get hold of these furloughed people, and I don't know what the legality of that stuff is, to be honest, but if you can somehow contact those furloughed people and get them to who's running this now. Okay, you've been furloughed. Is there someone internally that's still kind of managing the stuff that we were working on? Can I talk to them? You know, get those internal referrals, or as Gabby said, external referrals. Are there anyone else in your space who, you know, still working, still doing, you know what we do? Hopefully, you know, you have value in how we work together and what we provide you with.
Yeah.
You know, anyone else in the market that we could work with? So I think if anything else, it's leveraging those relationships and the referrals, certainly internally, but externally as well.
I think, again, just to sort of add a little bit of realism as well, is that there is just completely zero point in continuing to kind of resiliently smash your head against a closed door if it's closed and there's no one behind it. So I think this comes back to that point at the start, which is about gathering that insight. If consistently your stakeholders are all from prospect to prospect to prospect furloughed, is there some insight there about the business criticality that they're seeing internally, or the fact that or business criticality as it now relates to the COVID climate? So it's sort of understanding what are the things that this prospect or customer are still concerned about and working on as a skeleton staff, and does my product service offering help there or not? And it might do with a little switch or kind of a revisit to the value proposition. So if I use an example of what we've done, there's a lot of nice to have kind of bells and whistles on our platform that people are just not interested in at the moment. And the value proposition of our platform that we've doubled down on at the moment is its ability to drive cost reductions. So as I say, if we go back 3 weeks ago to another life where we were just kind of continuing, we would sell against a number of different goals. But now we've really focused just on the ones that are going to be pertinent to this climate. So that doesn't stop these people being furloughed, or it doesn't reopen budgets, but it might lead you down a different path where those new stakeholders are not furloughed, or they still have a budget that's running. Yeah. But also it might not, which is where that sort of realism comes, and that's insight, which is obviously not what you want to see. You feed back into your models, which might bring that revenue number down lower. Yeah. And then you work with your board and your VC or whoever is the appropriate people to be planning with, and see what's next. Absolutely, I think one of the key things at the moment is through business development, and this is for marketing personnel and for business development. This is the time for value contribution. This is like value added stuff right now. We're in a situation where you've got organizations who are furloughing their staff. Is about how can we build value. We're not necessarily trying to sell at this point because the right people or the right relationships aren't there. What you're trying to do is build an affinity with those individuals within the company to create advocacy for when they return. So things, I think Franco's just mentioned about LinkedIn being the ideal platform. I'd actually disagree. I've had numerous LinkedIn messages from people still prospecting like it's like nothing's going on, and it's turned me off immediately. It leaves a bad taste in your mouth. This is a time for adding value to a community or to your network or to your clients. Things like this, for example, webinars, perfect. With TechSPARK, we've been running these for like 3 and a bit weeks now, talking around commentary, talking around how we can support and how they're seeing things, how it's impacting them personally, building up some really strong relationships, albeit, but an understanding of actually what's going on. Obviously, we have commercial relationships with these people as well, but they are also our partners. So building out that relationship with them via this, because we can't see them at events. It's impossible to go and meet them in, at frameworks or Runway East for a beer and pizza and a lightning talk. So we're using this opportunity with webinars to actually get some time with them and to understand and build some value to it. And
that could be just a talking shop, or that could be actually a guide or some tips and advice. It could be all sorts of things that you could be doing at the moment. If you're working with one client and something's worked really, really well, and you could see that it's transferable to your other client, spend some time talking about that with them, because again, that is, you're sharing knowledge, you're sharing best practices, you're building relationships. There's also the potential there for revenue and for a conversion within that conversation. So that's one thing I would say. But also on the flip as well, I've seen some companies responding really sort of tackily to COVID in terms of just, wrapping up their product and going, oh, it's free because of COVID, and using hashtag COVID-19, hashtag COVID, whatever. And it's a no-no. That you're actually going to, if that's your marketing output and your marketing strategy, you're going to hinder your sales team when they come back, or, even when they try to pick the phone up, because that person is going to think, oh, that was really tacky. I mean, I've seen it 3 or 4 times on LinkedIn with product services, technology services, wrapping it up as a freebie. There's no relational context to it at all, but they're just jumping on this whole COVID thing, and that's a really bad and a kind of tacky tactic that's going to hinder sales development in the future.
Completely.
Yeah, I mean, you see it, people unfortunately see kind of world events and things as a reason to do some marketing, put some content out, and even previous, I'm struggling to think of specific examples, but quite often you see it just doesn't, it's offensive, or it's, badly timed, whatever it might be. Now, again, I mean, massively compounded by the fact that we're all experiencing the reality of working from home and, homeschooling and blah, 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 professional and personal lives being smushed together in these weird ways. Yeah. So to try and get anything that kind of sees like it's trading off or taking advantage of the situation, I mean, quite rightly, falls on deaf ears. So you're going to be managing your brand, and don't do it, guys.
Right, guys, we're a bit pushed for time. We're gonna sort of wrap up finally, just with some of the questions we've got left from the right hand side. We've answered some of we've gone through because they're relevant to the points we were discussing. There's a question from Zara, and this is to the panel. What is the one thing to prepare for recovery?
Yeah, and at the risk of sounding a little bit repetitive, before even that, the good thing about an event like this and the impending recession, if we're not already in a recession, is that this is a event recession as opposed to a financial recession. So in theory, obviously we're in uncharted waters, but in theory this is time limited and is followed by a graph going in the right direction. So absolutely, there is what you can be doing now and to weather the storm, and then there's what you should be doing for the new normal. And again, I would say and what we've been doing and finding really helpful is going back to, getting your crystal ball out as best as you can and understanding for your customers and your market, what could new normal look like, and how does your value proposition need to be adapted to that. So again, if I use Yellowdog as an example, I've said that we've been focusing on the cost reduction value proposition for now, for the kind of weather the storm phase, but the platform is a cloud platform, and the value proposition that we'll be working towards hopefully next week, but unlikely next week, whenever this starts to come to an end, is the scalability and the fact that people, when businesses restart, they're going to be needing to make up for lost time, and they're going to be wanting to go into overproduction. So our value proposition is focusing around that elasticity and that scalability. That will be different for you business to business, but I would say it's again just refocusing your value proposition for what could be ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing that we're certainly doing with HDE is actually, we already reevaluated our value proposition in response to our clients wanting to focus on different verticals and different markets. So we've made provisions in terms of data provisions. We've been sort of building out sort of contacts and information and sort of campaign planning ready for an uptake in that as well at the moment. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Jack?
Yeah, I think that, planning is the word that I would use to, this is and I've heard this from senior clients at brands, marketeers, etc., as well as the agency clients that I work with directly, and other people I've been speaking to. And I think one of the positives we can take out the current situation is having a bit of time to do some planning. And I appreciate. I'm definitely finding it hard to concentrate. I think a lot of people say seems to be quite hard to get into that sort of deep focus work at the moment because there's a million things going on in our brains. But if there is a bit of spare time because you're a bit quiet, client work or whatever, this is the time to be planning. And if nothing else, if you don't have one already, business development strategy, really focused business development plan, all your marketing plan, content plan, all the tactics, all that stuff that maybe you kind of haven't articulated before, haven't documented, haven't really thought about. This is the time to do it. Get all that stuff really robust so that, again, it's an open question of when it will start again. But having all that stuff articulated, having a key focus, value proposition nailed, all that stuff, this is a time to invest in that because if nothing else, you've got the time to do it. And I'm sure there's probably a massive to-do list that you've been, I think that's probably the most relevant to the conversation today. That would be something that would be focusing on. Good point.
And then to Franco's question, and Franco, we sympathise or empathise with you hugely, obviously, as an events-led business. But guys, do you have any tips for Franco around the event industry? In terms of, obviously, virtual events like this are picking up and we're doing more and more of these. And, my day is full of webinar events and video conferencing. But are there any tips for kind of post-COVID in terms of how this is going to impact the event industry? Or are there any immediate tips or advice you can give Franco in terms of how he can kind of react or still, use the events to generate revenue?
Well, I know Franco, so he's a good guy. He does a really good job already of bringing the Bristol event community together. So I think keep up the good work on that side, Franco, because as you said before, those connections and business connections and personal connections will really come into their own in the longer term. So keep up the good work on that front. I guess seeing if you're looking to monetize some of these events, I've always seen events as it is effective in the extension of the publishing industry, and a lot, there's no surprise that a lot of large conferences are owned by publishing companies or were started by publishing companies. So thinking about content, speakers, how can you monetize that stuff in some way? Can you get some keynote people to come and do something which you could, charge tickets for? Could you be thinking about monetizing the content you produce in different ways, white papers? I don't know. It's like it's trying to creatively think your way out of this scenario. What would you produce in a normal event scenario? And if you're looking to monetize it, how can you then potentially monetize that stuff in the short term? But I think the community work that Franco does, which obviously is similar to TechSPARK, and I'm sure Manchester Digital is very similar in the sense of the community side of this is really, really important at the moment. So appreciate your work on that side, Franco.
Cool, brilliant, nice one, guys. Well, look, I hope that was useful to everybody. And Jack, Gabby, thanks again for joining us.